Hello and welcome to India's World. Today we ask whether there is a possibility of a thaw between the two main parties in Bangladesh, the ruling Awami League and the opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party or BNP. The BNP had boycotted national elections held in January 2014 and the local elections that have taken place since then. It instead chose to follow a strategy of street protests, which perhaps to its horror led to a rash of high-profile attacks by the Islamic extremists. Over time, while the BNP's street protests have lost momentum, the shrinking oppositional political space is sought to be occupied by the Islamic extremists. BNP leader Begum Khalida Zia has now indicated that her party might be willing to drop its demand of a neutral caretaker government to oversee fresh elections. She has also wondered aloud why the Awami League and the BNP should not sit together and talk. The question, however, is whether the Awami League and the opposition are likely to enter any kind of negotiations as the threat of Islamic extremism grows in Bangladesh. To discuss the possibility of a dialogue between the Awami League and the BNP, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Veena Sikri. She's been India's High Commissioner to Malaysia and Bangladesh. She was also India's Consul General in Hong Kong and Director General of Indian Council for Cultural Relations. Professor S.D. Muni, a legendary professor of South Asian Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He's currently an emeritus professor there. He's also been India's ambassador to Laos and India's special envoy for Southeast Asia. And we have with us Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty. He's been India's ambassador to Philippines, Thailand and Bangladesh and has served in diplomatic assignments at Cairo, Jeddah, London and Karachi. I welcome all of you to this discussion. Ambassador Sikri, do you think that the decision of the BNP to drop its demand for formation of a caretaker government to conduct parliamentary elections offers a tentative opening, a potential opening for resolving the extended political deadlock in Bangladesh?
Well, I think one must look at the situation of the BNP today. The BNP today is a greatly weakened party. It's weakened in terms of leadership because Prime Minister Khalida Zia has not been well and she has been unable to exercise the kind of control over her party that she had legendarily enjoyed earlier. A lot of people have been leaving the BNP, and even if they haven't left the BNP, they are very reluctant to participate in street protests. It is true that after the January 2014 elections, the BNP has realized that it was a huge mistake on its part to boycott those elections. And they thought they could make up for it by street protests. That has totally backfired. Public opinion has moved against them. And even within Bangladesh today, the commentators and analysts who are asking for fresh elections have now dropped the demand and are talking about the next 4 years. So the first thing to understand is that even if there is a dialogue, even if they say, okay, fine, let's sit at a table, and they sit at a table and talk, that dialogue cannot be about having elections now. The term of the present government will definitely run its course. What I think could be a very practical dialogue is about strengthening political institutions in Bangladesh, strengthening democratic institutions, strengthening the election commission, giving it special powers, strengthening the anti-corruption commission, strengthening the independence of the judiciary and the executive. These are the kind of things that certainly can be talked about. But one has to really realize that Prime Minister Khalida Zia is in a very weakened position. Just yesterday and day before, one of her top leaders, for the first time, a BNP top leader who was re-elected repeatedly, who was minister, has been sentenced to death. The appeal Salahuddin Qadir Chowdhury's appeal for rejection of the death sentence has been denied, and now he certainly, maybe after one review petition and a presidential clemency petition, if he wants it, it will be a huge blow to the BNP. So one has to understand the local situation and understand that the feeling of the people of Bangladesh today is for economic progress and prosperity, and they are fed up of politics.
Professor Muni, although Khalida Zia has dropped the demand for caretaker government to conduct fresh elections, she hasn't dropped the demand for a fresh election nonetheless. And that doesn't seem a sort of a pragmatic demand either.
Well, what has she dropped? She has dropped caretaker, which is totally redundant in the given context. She tried her best to bring the caretaker concept by going to these street protests. And mind it, those street protests, though were exploited by the extremists and Jamaat and others, even her cadres were very, very well active there. And you would recall that there are charges on her also for attack on the bus and this and that. Therefore, what is it which she has dropped? That is question one.
She didn't attack the bus. Her party
Well, there are
attacked
charges.
the bus. So you can put charges like,
I said there are
any
charges.
other country in South Asia, you can put whatever charges you like against any political leader.
No, I am not justifying the charges. I am saying she is under pressure. Therefore, what has she dropped is actually something which was not quite relevant. Number one. Number two, just hold on. Secondly, what is she expecting out of the dialogue? If she is expecting that by talking she would persuade Hasina to go back to the election process, I mean, that again is absolutely unthinkable. The whole international community, which had reservations on Hasina's election government, are now reconciling with it. Internally, she is absolutely in a firm position. There is absolutely no way in which an agenda for a dialogue is really available. Therefore, what Veena said, strengthening democratic institutions, I don't know if that is on BNP's agenda at all. If that was on the agenda, she would not have done from early this year what she actually did. Therefore, I don't see much in the gesture which she is making. And as Ambassador Sikri says very rightly, that this is a gesture of her own utter helplessness and frustration from which she wants to come out and probably, revive her political status.
Pinak, do you see anything positive at all, or are you as negative as your other co-panelists that Khalida Zia was so foolish that she made this overture? I would think as a politician she would have thought about it. She probably also knows fresh elections are not possible. So when she says, why shouldn't we, the Awami League and BNP, see one another? Why shouldn't we sit? We have established parliamentary government together. She's clearly extending an olive branch. Now the question is, what for? What does she want out of this?
Since you've painted the context in such a negative manner, I
think the other discussants
I will try to look at some positive factors in it. So I think Khalida Zia's position is, typically sort of, I think one could explain it by the famous metaphor कि 100 चूहे खाकर बिल्ली हज को चली.
And this is positive?
Well, I mean, but she's changing. The positive part is that she's changed her tune and she's looking for a dialogue.
Incidentally, even her Raj visit has been postponed.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, she actually postponed that visit for, obviously, I think the visit was very important for her because she used to be invited by the king personally every year for Umrah. But she postponed the visit because I think her back is to the wall in terms of her political career, her party, etc. And the party is crumbling. I think from the edges it is fraying. People are willing to flee the party today. And of course, the death sentence on Salahuddin Qadir Chaudhary is a huge blow, clearly. But then, who is Salahuddin Qadir Chaudhary? He's a war criminal. We all know his background, what he did. So that's the kind of company she kept.
We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the prospect of a dialogue between BNP and the Awami League in Bangladesh. Mr. Sikri, has the politically volatile atmosphere in Bangladesh created an opportunity for forces opposed to secularism and democracy to reassert themselves in a big way?
Yes, I think certainly the politically volatile atmosphere has given space to the Islamic extremists, and even now we do see elements of Islamic State and so on, coming to Bangladesh and trying to get some support from that. We've seen, for example, families of Bangladesh origin from UK leaving UK and going to join the Islamic State in Syria. So obviously that pressure is there, and I think that this politically volatile atmosphere has caused the international community to repeatedly take over excessive interest in what is happening in the internal situation in Bangladesh. And that is why I think it was entirely wrong in 2014 when the international community tried to prevent the elections. And then, trying to say that, because the BNP boycotting don't have the elections. And when the elections were held, then they said, okay, now let's see, they were very surprised. They thought that the Jamaat-e-Islami would be able to stop the elections with their violent tactics. And when that didn't happen, then after the election, the protests continued. It was terrible, actually. Now, the international community has not only reconciled with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, but has realized the need for political stability in Bangladesh. So I think that the move by Prime Minister Khalida Zia is first of all an attempt to retain her relevance, because if she does not have any idea of dialogue, she will completely outlive her relevance, and Jamaat-e-Islami is ready to take her place. And secondly, the international community, I'm sure, is goading her to bring some semblance of political stability to Bangladesh, so that some normal pathway can be taken out at least in the next few years. So I think that's very important, because otherwise the Jamaat-e-Islami is certainly trying its best to attract more supporters.
Professor Muni, do you agree with her that the BNP is doing this because it has not been able to apply enough social or economic pressure through its protests to weaken the Awami League government, and now it finds that Awami League has become stronger and is becoming stronger by the day, perhaps, if one were to believe Ambassador Sikri. So therefore they are sort of suing for peace.
No, that's absolutely correct, because whose base is being eroded now? It is more the BNP's base which is being eroded. Not only that the extremist factions within the BNP are going back to Jamaat, but the moderate factions are actually going to Awami League.
Yeah.
And she realizes that the grassroots support which the BNP enjoyed is fast eroding. She probably wants to stop that. Fair enough. Now, my problem is that I would very much welcome, as you are suggesting, Bharat, that the two ladies come to terms with each other and stability is given to Bangladesh. The democratic space becomes stronger. My problem arises that the two ladies actually come from different socio-political routines. And therefore, commitment to democracy, which we are all looking for, and commitment to stability, which we are looking for, unless one of them, and in this case particularly Khalida Zia, the kind of background of the whole party as it is, and even the members who have been in it, unless she is able to liberate herself from them. Now, there are within the party serious questions on her leadership. She is talking about reorganizing the party, she cannot. The senior leaders are going out in public to say that the leadership is actually frustrating us, and they are not being able to do. Under such circumstances, what kind of a support to democratic institutions and norms we can expect out of Khalida Zia?
Yeah, tough question, but Pinak, if BNP feels that it's lost out on political power, it's also lost out therefore on giving political patronage, because patronage is what keeps the party together, then why is it that it didn't participate in those local elections? It initially did, then boycotted it. Is it because their assessment is that the process of elections has been completely vitiated and is controlled, is going to be unfair to them? So it's not as if by choice they kept out, because after having boycotted the national election, they did try and participate in the local elections. But when they saw how they were being conducted, they withdrew.
That's partly true, of course, because I think most elections in Bangladesh have that element of control or some rigging.
But is it more so now than it was earlier?
Well, I can't say that it is more so now, because if you look at the trend, the pre-main election trend, general election trend, actually the Awami League mayors all lost in the election. So if it was so unfair, that so why did they lose? In fact, that was the trend that most analysts at that time were saying, that they should make the BNP realize that they should join the elections. Because don't forget, Bangladesh has had a very long electoral history of changing one government after one term.
No, my question really is that in today's circumstances, not January 2014, is the BNP virtually being forced to keep out of the electoral process because it's totally controlled by the Awami League, or are they doing it by choice?
No, I think they are doing it by choice, in the sense they are staying out by choice. But if they participate, I think that will help the process because people will see what is happening on the ground, and then there will be a reaction. If there is too much of rigging, there will be a reaction.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you something slightly different. See, it's not as if earlier attempts were not made for a dialogue between the two parties. There was an attempt in mid-2014 between BNP and Awami League to talk. Now, why were those talks stalled? Who stalled them?
I think at that time, Khalida Zia had a really inflated notion about the support she had from the international community and also from certain elements within Bangladesh. She really thought that she could hold out and she would get what she wanted because she had the support from the international community. I think it's totally misplaced. And I think in Bangladesh, as in India and many other countries of South Asia, international interference only angers the people, it puts up the backs of the politicians, and it doesn't help at all. So I think that has been really counterproductive, and I hope that the international community, the Western powers particularly, have realized that intervening on behalf and patently in support of one person or the other is counterproductive. I think that that is why she had carried on in that very arrogant fashion at that time, and with the result that she didn't get the support of her own people. She was not discussing with her own party people, but she was just discussing with certain Western ambassadors and using their advice to do whatever she wanted to do. She lost out support within her party. And I also think there's another element that even the international community and everybody within Bangladesh is telling her that she must break up with the Jamaat-e-Islami. And that she is finding it very difficult to do. Yeah. And I think we must have one point here which is very important, and that is, forget the international community for the moment. What about the role of Pakistan? What about the direct influence that Pakistan is exercising on her and her party and on the Jamaat-e-Islami? They have direct control. They try to control the situation in Bangladesh through their control on her and the Jamaat-e-Islami. And for her, the control was directly exercised through Salahuddin Qadir Chaudhry. So this particular execution sentence on Salahuddin Qadir Chaudhry is a big blow to the BNP. It's a big blow internally to her freedom of action and what Pakistan was doing in Bangladesh. Okay. This is a very important point to see how the situation in Bangladesh is playing out.
Okay, we need to take a break at this point again. We'll be back again in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the prospects of a dialogue between the BNP and the Awami League in Bangladesh. Professor Muni, now looking from India and as a friend of Bangladesh, what has been the cost to Bangladesh of the animosity and mistrust between the two main parties?
Well, it has given a spectre of instability in Bangladesh.
Only a spectre or real instability?
Well, real instability in the sense the government has continued to function for whatever worth it is. It is possible that the government might have not been able to carry out many of the programs of development in Bangladesh which they intend to or they should have done. Therefore, it is instability in that sense. But otherwise, the system has remained intact despite all the pressures internally. And this is a kind of a loss. Otherwise, in terms of economic and other matters, Bangladesh has not done too bad. Even in terms of rate of growth, Bangladesh is one of the success stories in South Asia today. Even in terms of human development indicators, Bangladesh is not too far behind. In fact, ahead of us in some of the areas, but that apart. Therefore, yes, with a greater sense of confidence, the government could have probably carried out far more other projects. As Veena said, probably international community would have been far more active in supporting the developmental projects. May I submit here that international community, in fact, until recently, I would say until March, April, continued to bank upon the so-called vulnerability of the Hasina government.
But they did not withdraw the beneficial tariff regime for government exports, for example.
I'm not going into those nitty-gritties, but politically sympathies remained with BNP, which has now dried out, and that indicates why Pakistan factor has become very feeble now. Internally, BNP relied on two forces, Jamaat, that is the extremist faction, and the army. And both of them, after particularly that revolt which took place earlier, the internal support has been slipping away from BNP. So internal support is slipping, outside support is slipping. That's what the situation is today.
Okay. Pinak, the international community stopped supporting her, do you think, because they found that because the ongoing violence, including high-profile killings of liberals and bloggers and, secular people, so firebomb attacks against buses, against cities and ordinary folk, do you think BNP lost international support also because of that? Because they were seen as people who were providing the context for that kind of violence.
Indeed, that was one of the reasons. But the international community does not see the domestic ground level situation as clearly as we do, I think. Because they tend to focus on things like democracy, human rights, institutions, etc., etc. But the dynamics of personalities, the dynamics of the society, sometimes I think eludes them. So I think so they take these positions. So my view is that BNP, let us not forget that BNP is ideologically different from the Awami League. The ideological basis for the BNP is quite different. I'll not go into details, but we all know what it is. And that is why that ideological base today has been weakened. Because the people, you saw the Shahbag movement, for example. So you realize that the younger generation also has moved away from that ideology. Because they are sticking to an ideology which is whose I think time is over. And hence the younger people are no longer, they don't want to go back to a pro-Pakistani, very Islamic kind of thing, a national identity.
Okay. Now, Master Sikri, if Pinak can see it, you can see it, Professor Muni can see it, I'm sure, the BNP leadership can also see, how Bangladeshi society is changing. So, has the time come, or has the BNP started distancing itself from Jamaat-e-Islami? Because some people claim that each time a verdict came against Jamaat-e-Islami people, who were to be hanged by the War Crimes Tribunal, in the public protest, BNP was not very visible. So they are suggesting that BNP is already distancing itself. So has the time come for the BNP to sort of cut the links it has with the Jamaat?
I think if the BNP is willing to recognize that the people of Bangladesh want a secular democratic Bangladesh, then certainly the first thing they have to do is to cut their links with Jamaat. They keep saying, Khaleda Zia keeps saying, oh, it's only for elections. What do you mean only for elections? We all know that to win elections, if you have a partner, you have to do a lot of compromises on the position you take on many issues. But repeatedly, it is like, for example, Sheikh Hasina's election in 2008. And the kind of vote she got, the kind of 2/3 majority she got, unexpected even for Sheikh Hasina. But she got it because the vote was against the BNP-Jamaat combination. And that vote, the Jamaat factor adversely affecting BNP vote, is something that the people of BNP have realized, but has Khaleda Zia realized it. And here I would again draw attention to the influence of Pakistan in this factor. Exactly. So for India, the best and most important need of the hour is to strengthen the secular democratic forces in Bangladesh. This is very important. There is a demand for this, and we have to, by force of example of what is happening in India and by interaction with the people, strengthen the secular democratic forces. I'm not talking of any political party or any political individual. In fact, even parties like the Awami League themselves have to look at strengthening secular democratic forces.
Let me take this question now to Professor Muni, that fine, these two parties cannot cooperate in building democratic institutions, but at least they can cooperate in strengthening the security initiatives of the government to contain Islamic fundamentalism. That would be the first sign that BNP has realized that, the path they were on to up to now was not correct and they must move on. And therefore, I don't personally consider BNP as a non-secular party, but let's say the secular elements of BNP and the Awami League actually begin some kind of cooperation in security measures to contain Islamic extremism.
Yes, Bharat, hopefully if what Pinak says is correct, in the sense of the ideological distancing between the core of the BNP and the Jamaat. What I see in Bangladesh ideologically is a drift towards a very sharp polarization between moderate Islam and the extremist Islam, like it or not. And BNP doesn't have a political space between the two, frankly, ideologically. Therefore, what we will see is this polarization widening. Let us hope.
Why would you not see BNP becoming moderate?
Well, its roots are not there. Its sociological genie is not there. The way the party has come up, the way party has cultivated constituency, the way party has often depended upon army and Jamaat in its electoral victory and whatnot. And the way it has pleaded its foreign policy, its domestic ideology, whatever you call it. Therefore, that space is now, and it is high time that, and I hope that the secular or the moderate Islam faction or polarization pole is stronger than the other one, because the danger lies in anything getting topsy-turvy here and there, and Bangladesh has given us several examples in the history of things going in an unexpected manner. Okay,
my last question, we are running out of time. Pinak, what are the potential factors that could promote a quiet, behind-the-scenes restart of talks between the BNP and the Awami League for the sake of Bangladesh, not for the sake of electoral gains immediately?
I think the best way for them is to nominate people they trust, the two leaders, and let them start a dialogue quietly, not in the public domain. If they really mean business, kind of a track two thing that they can start. And if it proceeds and reaches some kind of a, agenda of, common agenda, then it can be brought out into the more open and have a wider dialogue. And I think it will be acceptable to the people. But let me also say that for the BNP, it is extremely difficult to come out of its ideological mooring. Because one great influence on the BNP and the Jamaat is Pakistan. And they have been advising them to stay together, because it is in Pakistan's interest to create that Islamist sort of ideological party. I think that is a very important factor.
But we've really run out of time, but a quick answer. You see, it doesn't matter what your ideology is. If there is no Bangladesh, no political space left in Bangladesh, what ideology will you practice? Therefore, there is a need for the two parties to start a dialogue of some kind at least.
Yes, there is a need for the two parties. Now, for example, in Bangladesh today, there's a move to have a third party. People like Kamal Hussain have started that, and I don't know how much support he has, but certain civil society elements and certain elements from Jatiya Party seem to be sharing his platform. So I think, yes, civil society and the army, the neutrality of the army is certainly a very important factor. And I think right from the fact in 2007 where they were
You're running out of time. So
okay, so I would say, yes, by all means have a dialogue, but don't link the dialogue to elections tomorrow.
Okay, fair enough.
That is very bad, because that will make it politicized all over again. And nobody wants elections in Bangladesh at this time.
Thank you. We've run out of time. I'd like to thank all of you. Ambassador Pinak, Ranjan Chakravarty, Professor S.D. Muni, Ambassador Veena Sikri, thank you very much for participating in this discussion. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Till then, goodbye, and thanks for watching India's World.